Hey, everyone. Sleepy Reader here. Damien, comic book thoughts yet again. This time it's mostly going to be comics from a while ago. By that I mean stuff I've read almost a month ago, some of it. I kind of accumulated a pile of some things I thought I that I wanted to talk about in a video, and now I'm doing it. Part of the interest might be that some of these are things I've been following along and have come to their conclusion, and some people might want to know what I thought by the end, but I want to talk about them anyway. It might help people decide, whether they want to pick up the trade or buy digitally or whatever. But before that, I want to talk about one that's relatively new. Last night, Saturday night, I was on the comic book roundtable with Travis, and we talked about comics from last week, but we thought this one particular comic was from this week, but now I realize it was from last week, and it was one of the stronger comics from last week, and maybe one of the stronger number ones from Image in a while, and it was called The New World. And I didn't have it on my pull list. I just picked it up at the store. Initially, I think I didn't put it on my pull list because of Alesh Kott, I'm not sure how to say his name, whose writing sometimes kind of annoys me. It's a little too on the nose, a little too, my politics or your evil kind of science fiction, if you know what I mean. And there's probably that in here, but I just like the way the whole book is done and the science fiction qualities of it and the incredible art. The first thing I noticed when thumbing through it was the art by Tradd Moore. It's been a while since I read a comic drawn by Tradd Moore. I feel like he must have changed quite a bit. There's something incredibly precise and just kind of, perfectionist, but all drawn in these lines that create kind of a flat image in a way. It's also colored by Heather Moore, who maybe she's his wife, maybe she's a relative, or maybe that's just coincidence. But her coloring really also creates a very interesting design and look to all of his incredibly detailed artwork here. So that's a huge pleasure, the artwork. And then this has the feeling of a pretty fully realized near future kind of dystopia. Also the two heroes are kind of intriguing, a man and a woman. The woman being a cop on a reality cop show where the audience votes whether the cop should kill the perp or not. But our hero, even though she's the number 2 most popular cop, never does kill the perp no matter what the voters vote. And there's just lots and lots of interesting detail here that you can go through and enjoy multiple times. It's an 80-page book. I don't know how, you would think it would take a whole year for an artist to do this many pages at such a detailed level. So I'm assuming it's a mini-series, but I'm definitely on for the ride for however long it goes, assuming it continues in the vein of what I read here. So it's kind of the somewhat rebellious girl who's on the cop show and is also the granddaughter of the president of California, is going to meet and have some kind of romantic relationship with a guy who's kind of a techno-terrorist, not a killer or anything, but someone who wants to, down with the police state and is hacking the system the best he can. And they both have quite the unusual look about them, and they meet at kind of a rave. Some elements of these are a bit maybe cliche about what hip young people in their early 20s would be like, based on today. But it's a lot of fun and visually extremely exciting. So for people who like science fiction and indie comics, I think this is a really good one to look for. There's only one copy left in my shop, but then I saw a lot of other copies in another comic shop I popped into. So going back at least a month, because the new one of Mr. Miracle number 10 has come out now, but Mr. Miracle number 9, and I haven't read 10 yet, and Mr. Miracle number 9 really struck me as some height or low of Tom King's depressing comics, because it takes place in a peace negotiation going on in Apocalypse. And every detail of Apocalypse is just horrific. And in a sense, that's true. I mean, to the original idea of Apocalypse, it is like hell. It was never brought to such depressing light, depressing detail in Jack Kirby comics. It was more a fun hell, I suppose. I mean, it was not fun, but you know what I mean. Whereas here, King really brings out the depressingness, and the fact that our characters are just there at a peace negotiation and kind of have to just accept all the horrors around them nonchalantly and, in a sense, take part in them just makes it all the more sort of depressing and horrific. So, brilliant masterpiece, or pushing his depression on us too far? I don't know. The decision that Scott Free is given at the end is horrific and echoes through the whole New Gods saga, the Fourth World stuff. It certainly makes a lot of sense, but it's so emotionally difficult to deal with for me anyway. So, yeah. And where will Mr. Miracle wind up? The next issue has Darkseid on the cover. So far, Darkseid has been not showing his face. And we've got a lot of Darkseid is. We have hints that Darkseid is affecting reality. I don't know. But brilliantly depressing. Speaking of depressing and some elements of brilliance, The Freak, Part 1 of 3 by Matt Lesniewski, and he credits his editor on the cover, Grant McLaughlin. So that's interesting. I guess he felt his editor helped him a lot shape his story or something along that line, and so he really wanted to give him credit on the cover, I'm guessing. I don't know. And Matt is someone I follow on Twitter. I've met him at a con, or chatted with him at a con at his table, got a commission from him, read his other self-published comics. This is a self-published comic. And it just seems to me that his art is going up to the next level very rapidly. I already liked his art a lot, but it's, talk about detail, he makes Trad Moore look undetailed by comparison. And it's amazing how much one can get out of such detailed pictures. Is your eye still knows where to go and everything. And I know that he is... So he only published 100 copies of this. I'll put his Twitter down below. You can see a lot of his art by following him on Twitter. Some of his commissions now look just amazing, even better than what I've seen in here. Where was I? So I know that now he's kind of shopping this around to see if some actual publisher wants to publish it in color. And it's an odd parable of loneliness and ugliness and being rejected by society for being strange looking. And at least I take it to be a parable. It's hard to know where it's going to go in the next two parts. And it's kind of so far it seems like kind of a simple story. A little simpler than what you see most mainstream indie publishers publishing. But, I mean, I wish it all the best. So what I was saying is, if by some chance he doesn't find someone who wants to publish this particular 3-part series in color, I hope he'll just print some more of the black and white ones so more people can enjoy his art and sort of be in on the start of this amazing artist. Because I'm sure if he keeps producing material like this and what I've seen on Twitter, there's going to be people wanting to snap him up to do their indie books with them. If he's not snapped up to do one that he writes himself, which also could happen. So yeah, lots, very cool. Hawkman, I don't know why I put this in the pile. I thought I actually already talked about this, but I guess maybe I didn't. I really enjoyed the art. I'm kind of a Brian Hitch fan all over again from this comic. It just seems like a really good choice for him. I'm really clicking with it, and his art and his vision seems to click well with Robert Venditti's way of writing Hawkman too. So I keep looking forward to more issues of that. Oh, here's Super Sons meet Dynomutt and the Blue Falcon. And Dynomutt, I feel like I've heard that name before, but I don't know if I've ever seen a Dynomutt cartoon way back when. But it's part of the Hanna-Barbera package of characters. And but this is done almost grim and gritty, not quite. There's a sense of humor to all of it. It's written by Peter Tomasi, by an artist, Fernando Passarin, who I think I remember seeing do some good stuff on Batgirl a while back. I don't know. I might have been confused with someone else. But I really enjoyed this one. I'd kind of hoped it was lighter fun that I could read with my daughter, but I think it's a little too on the depressing side for her at the moment. So, but this is a great one and done. If you find it somewhere, maybe in the back issue bins, I would say it's worth getting. Here's a disappointment, The Unexpected. It's art by Ryan Sook. It's part of the New Age of Heroes, which means it's supposed to be an artist-led comic to some extent. The artist is the co-plotter. The art is done before the script, and then the writer makes this. So the artist is the one who kind of paces out the story based on the plot that he and the writer have. That's my understanding of it. Have agreed upon, and then the writer comes back in and tries to make it all work with the script. And it looks. Of all of these. New Age of Heroes ones, it looks like it should have been a really good story, but unfortunately for me, the scripter was Steve Orlando, and he's a person, even under the normal scripting circumstances, who doesn't click very well with me, and his storytelling style, I get lost. And so I found this a horrible mess, even though I liked some of the characters. I don't know if they created the characters here or they came from Dark Knight's Metal, and I loved the art, but I've noticed even by issue, I got this issue 1 off the rack, and I noticed issue 3 the other day, and it was being drawn by someone else already. So I think I'll just have enjoyed the artwork on this one and leave it at that. Okay, here's 3 different comics from the Black Hammer universe that I wanted to mention. The last Black Hammer main story, now called Age of Doom, number 3, where it really should be just Black Hammer number 18 or something like that. But it was this keeps being really good, and maybe it flagged for me just slightly, and now it's back to being really awesome. I really enjoyed the brief visit to the Kingdom of Dream, Morpheus, the little Black Hammer take on the Neil Gaiman universe. And maybe it was a little too obvious. I don't know, but I enjoyed it. And then by the end of this issue, we have quite a revelation, which makes me think, are we getting closer to the answers to all the mysteries and where the Black Hammer crew of superheroes has ended up and why? And I wonder if their story will continue beyond any revelation, or will, since all of this obviously has been quite successful because there's been they've been publishing so many different Black Hammer universe comics at Dark Horse now. Will they try to stretch it out somehow? I kind of hope they solve the story and then move on to another story, but keep this group going, which might be too much to ask. I don't know. Yeah. So then another, the Dr. Star wrapped up in 4 issues, Dr. Star and the Kingdom of Lost Tomorrows. And this was, from beginning to end, very sad. Only a small personal redemption, no big redemption, no big superhero moments in the end. And it worked very well. And I think if you're in the mood for a bittersweet kind of sad story of someone with superpowers, then this will make a really good trade. And yeah. I really like that. And I'm also liking Quantum Age. I've only read number 1. Number 2 just came out this week. This is kind of starts from the position of a take on the Legion of Superheroes, I think. We even have a character that's clearly Brainiac, and there he is smooching some future version of Black Hammer, unless it's the same girl, Black Hammer number 2, who's lived 1,000 years. But it also has this whole plot about an invasion which devastated Earth and turned Earth into kind of a dystopian dictatorship, and the return of one of the invaders trying to get the Quantum League back in business. So very interesting. Also a kind of darker, more bitter feeling than the normal not Justice League, Legion of Superheroes. So turning inside out of that kind of thing. Maybe Jeff Lemire can't resist the depressed side of things. Are there too many depressed comics? Is that the real problem? Are there depression warriors out there forcing too much depression in our comics? Almost feels that way. Oh, there's the back cover. Yeah, so I look forward to reading issue 2 and seeing where that goes. Is this one a 4-part thing? It doesn't say. So yeah, I don't know how long Quantum Age will be. I hope it's a little longer than 4 parts. 4 issues hasn't seemed enough, especially with a larger cast, like with the Quantum League. Oh, and I wanted to mention reading Black Monday Murders Volume 2. I really loved Volume 1. It's an extremely unique comic in its pacing and its art style and its approach to the horror and conspiracy kind of idea. The star circle of people who are manipulating the whole planet and our economies and politics and everything. I'm going to spoil a bit here. So I really like this. It was less of the fun surprise of discovering a really new kind of comic. It was very familiar feeling from the first issue. There wasn't. It maintained the same sort of pace and layout and approach, but it added new layers of an information for things. And now I'm going to kind of spoil it. So you can come back when I'm not holding it up anymore. When I'm holding up my next comic, you can come back if you don't want this spoiled. At the end, after learning quite a bit, our detective comes and requests to join this Society of Mammon or whatever. He says, I want in. And I don't know if they actually let people in, because it's all about families and everything, but maybe as a lieutenant. But the Rothschild woman, I think that's who she is, says, good, have a seat, like she's going to hire him and he'll be part of what they do. And to me, that almost seemed like it could be the end of the series, that we've come through a dark circle and our character has been sucked into darkness and he's given into the darkness, and that's a horror story. And that's the end in a way. But there is an epilogue which shows some character that's been in exile being drawn back in, which definitely has that feeling of, okay, the story's going to continue, a new chapter will unfold. And of course, with the detective, whose name I can't remember right now, because it was a couple of weeks ago that I read this, the detective is, and there was a lot in here about believing. So now he believes in what's going on. And if you believe, maybe you need to join in because there's no other choice. But maybe he has some plan of becoming an insider and then undoing their work or something. So one could both see it being an end, him coming through the circle and turning out of solving the mystery and becoming evil, or there could be more to his story. But if Jonathan Hickman had wanted to end it, it just felt like it could have been the end right here. And it would have been satisfying in a dark, grim kind of way. But part of me is glad that it's not ending. I want to find out even more about Hickman's vision of this dark cabal of evil financiers and everything. It's gone, at this point, it's gone far beyond just manipulating the New York Stock Exchange. So, in a horror mode, something that did end, but is a much simpler story, was a Doppelganger from Alterna Comics. And I say this is, I haven't read a lot of Alterna. I've read, 3 or 4 different titles. And this is the best one of the ones I've read. And it came to a very satisfying ending. It was very much a Twilight Zone type of story. And it ended with one of those cliched horror endings, the return of the horrible thing, so to speak, that was satisfying for this kind of story. And the art was consistently good throughout, and nice colors. It's printed on newsprint. I don't know if they'll print their trades on newsprint, or whether they'll change the paper stock for the trades. But I'd say if you're in the mood for a Twilight Zone kind of story about a normal man caught up in a bizarre kind of situation, a normal family man with a dull job and everything caught up in this horrific situation, it's a fun read. I really liked it. Another one that ended very positively for me was Snagglepuss, the Snagglepuss Chronicles, which I was somewhat down on for the first 3 issues or more. I remember by issue 5 I was really liking it, and I really, really appreciated this final issue with its own way of circling back to the Hanna-Barbera cartoons in a very clever way. And I really appreciated... That was weird. My computer fell asleep and it should not have. I really appreciated now the shape of the whole story. The last issue kind of redeeming everything for me. So it is something I would recommend. It's lesser stuff compared to his just mind-boggling Flintstones series that he did a year and a half ago. But it keeps me wanting to see what the writer Mark Russell does. The art still strikes me as not having been the perfect choice for this story. It did seem to get better as it went along. So there's that. I hope they match him with better artists in future projects. I feel like he's still writing at DC, but I feel like I saw something. Oh, he's got a Vertigo series coming up, which on the face of it looked annoying, but hopefully it's better than it looks, where a superhero meets Jesus, and Jesus teaches him to be a superhero or something like that. I don't know. But then he's also apparently writing some Judge Dredd for 2000 AD, or for IDW's version of Judge Dredd, and some other licensed thing for some other smaller publisher. I forget what now, that I heard someone talking about. These things aren't that publicized. I don't know if it was James Bond or something like that. So I've got to hunt that stuff down. Another Alterna book, which I talked about before briefly, Go West, ended in 3 issues. And with issue 2, I sort of expected, issue 3 is just going to be the big fight between these two sides. And that's what it was. And while I kind of liked some of the coloring, the minimal coloring, the art had a lot of... wow, that's bloody. The art had a lot of weak moments. And the characters just hadn't been well enough developed, and so all of this fighting and stuff like that just had it just felt kind of random to me. So it's unfortunate because there were some good qualities to it and the art had its good moments. The idea of these survivors in some apocalyptic future where they've become like they're in a Clint Eastwood Western movie was fun, but it just didn't click well enough, and the last issue fell particularly flat. But if I saw this writer Garrett Gunn or even the artist Saint Yak working again in some comics, I'd probably give it a try. Phew. Okay, I feel bad not liking the end of Shipwreck, and at the moment I can't even remember very much about it. I must have read it a few weeks ago. The art was wonderful by Phil Hester and his colorist. I should look for the name of the colorist. I think it was Mark Engelert. And there were lots and lots of cool ideas in here. But I think it took 2 years for the 6 issues to come out. And the last issue felt like it was almost a year between issues, or 9 months or something. And which is part of why I can hardly connect to it. But it seemed all kind of wrapping up too easily. And yeah, I felt like Warren Ellis got distracted by other projects and then just decided to wrap this up quickly. So pretty disappointing. A disappointment of a different kind was Kill or Be Killed number 20. Let me just say before I start spoiling this that I loved the first 19 issues, and I was I was calling it one of the very best comics coming out every month. And the problem is it was all one long story, and it was very interesting how the story kept twisting and turning on itself, and it felt very true to itself. And so all the twists and turns felt very natural. They both felt dense and intense, but kind of glacial too. It was kind of a slowly evolving story. But a lot of what is in this final issue for me betrayed those other 19 good issues. And because it's all one story, it reflects back. It's hard for me to say, run out and buy all the trades now, because it has a terrible ending. Or it's not just like the ending didn't quite work. It's more like the ending was not in sync with the rest. And the rest was so brilliant that it feels to me like even more of a betrayal of that. But I might be having a more extreme reaction than I should, and it might still be a very enjoyable read in trades, despite, and maybe some people will accept this ending. So now I'm going to spoil it. This is the last comic I'm going to talk about. So, or you know what? I'll show comics I'm going to be reading soon at the end, so you can come back if you want. If you don't want it spoiled, but you want to see what else I say. It won't be that big deal if you just drop out now. But so, beginning to spoil, the big reveal really of this issue is everything we've had in the past 19 issues has been told to us by Dylan, our hero, from beyond the grave. He's dead. He's in the afterlife. He says, I can't tell you about that. That's a whole different story. How convenient. And just that fact alone, to me, unless he's in hell with the demon that he seemed to imagine, or there's some relationship with that, which there's not. And even that would have seemed silly, but at least it would have been in line with one possibility of what Killer Be Killed was about. It seems to make the whole thing about something else, and a whole different... It feels like a cheat that this very tight narrative by the person experiencing it is then a narrative that comes from the grave. It felt like something someone was writing down, an essay, a diary, a memoir, a note to their people they're close to or something, not a message from beyond, from a ghost. But that's not the worst of it. Or that's just the beginning, in my mind, of how he kind of betrays this story. Because although it's the person is dead, Dylan is dead, then, and he's, by the end of this issue, we know for sure he's dead, and he decides to fake out his audience. This ghost decides to tell us a pretend story where what happened when he actually survived. And he and this woman police officer become confidants, and she helps him and he helps her, and as a result, he becomes a better vigilante and goes on to have even more success and a good life where he balances being a vigilante and the rest of his life. Beautiful art, still really well written, as Ed Brubaker tends to do. So this is like a really well written cop-out. Because then, after giving us that story, it's, haha, that was a twist. The twist is I'm really just dead and I was just giving you the story you wanted for a minute. And then he goes on to give us the story of after his death, the revelations that happen. The police officer talks with his girlfriend, and then we get, another twist. The evil circles back around horror story twist that I liked in Doppelganger, but now it's his girlfriend is haunted by visions of a demon and is going to go out and be a vigilante. And that, so, for me anyway, does not fit with what I was getting out of the other 19 issues. And I think a lot of it has to do with, I presume a lot of it has to do with the decision to end the story. And so here's your sudden ending. I don't believe this is what the narrative was all about when we started, a message from beyond the grave about my life as a vigilante and how I ended up dying, but how the evil continued after, or the vigilante thing continued after me with my slightly neurotic girlfriend. It was an exploration of his own personal delusions and inner demons, and the ideas of taking action and exploring what it means to be a vigilante, what it means to be Spider-Man, and what a real-life vigilante might be going through. And it was brilliant in that, and this just is a kick in the balls for me at the end. So I wanted to say all that to warn people who might be reading it in trade. Don't get to the end and say, that damn Damien was telling me how this was one of the best comic books on the stands, and now it ends so badly. So I can't say I'm sad. I went along for the ride with Killer Be Killed, but it really shows how, well, endings are really hard, and how easily, at least but I think other readers can be disappointed by endings. And that's a problem with these long serialized stories, a 20-issue story that felt like it should be a 40-issue story or a 50-issue story, but it's all one story, so all its parts are important. If it were a series of single stories with recurring characters like the old-fashioned comics tended to be, and a lot of them were not great stories, but sometimes they were great stories, but you don't have this building up of everything is like a house of cards, and if you pull out that one card at the end, then the whole house falls over. But I soldier on because I still really enjoy this. Let me show you the stuff I have from this week that I hope to be reading soon. I've got Quantum Age #2, Cosmic Ghost Rider. Love that cover. I flipped at the art. I'm trying to remember what the art was like last issue, but somehow the art doesn't look as compelling to me in this issue as the previous issue. Well, I think it's the same artist. Deathstroke versus Batman, which is kind of a lighter, less important little Batman adventure, but I still find it kind of fun. Paper Girls #23. It was getting very intense last issue, but I'm kind of hoping Paper Girls will wrap up, maybe like give it 5 more issues. If Brian K. Vaughan can find a way to kind of bring all the elements together and send our girls back and have a happy ending, I would be really happy with that. Shade the Changing Woman. I'm now 2 issues behind on this. I've sort of stopped caring about this, but I think this might be the last issue. Does it say final issue on it? So I just thought I'd follow it through the end. Yeah, it says Fin at the end. Fini. So I just kind of spoiled the ending for myself, but I don't really care. Darkseid is shiny. I'm almost afraid with each Mr. Miracle issue to have my heart wrenched and to feel depressed and pulled down into someone else's psychosis. But I will eventually read it. I was pretty psyched to read Leviathan. I love giant monsters. I love this kind of detailed artwork that this kind of promises. Nick Patera did good work on Manhattan projects. I actually have not ever read Chew by John Layman. I read some DC work by his that was pretty good. But I've seen one video where people are giving it a pretty bad review. But that was just one video. Everyone's different. And then today I went for a walk and I popped into another comic book store that's not the one where I have my pull, and I saw She Could Fly, a new book from Berger Books at Dark Horse. I like this cover. I flipped into here. Wow, it looks dark now. But I flipped a few pages and I saw artwork that I liked. So yeah, that was one of the pages. That looked really cool to me. So I thought, I'll pick it up. First issue. Did not realize it's a $5 first issue. It's only one of 4, so I guess if I like it, I don't know. Do I wait for the trade? Probably. It's interesting that it has a quote from G. Willow Wilson on it because it looks kind of like one of the covers of her comic book Air, way back in her Vertigo days. And then I also picked up The Seeds, which I thought I'd put on my pull list, but I now realize I didn't. I just, at the time of making choices about my pull list, I just was too afraid of Ann Nocenti. I've seen some thumbs up on this so far. I loved David Aja's work on Hawkeye, so I'm glad I found this was the last copy in the store. I'm glad I found this. I'll give it a try and see if I want to put it on my pull, or perhaps wait for trade. Wow, it looks black and white. That surprises me. Interesting. Does David Aja normally do his own color? Somehow I feel like... and also that came out this week is The Highest House. I kind of decided, I knew it was I believe it's 3 graphic albums originally done for the French market, now made into 6 issues. So I thought, well, I'll just read the whole story at once, but I liked having them in the floppies rather than getting them in a paperback later because of the no fear they're very high quality floppies and the having no gutter loss. That's what I wanted to say. But then I flipped to the end and it says the end of part 1. So I don't know what that's about because I think they only published those 3 volumes in Europe, but maybe there's more. Maybe they're doing more in Europe, or maybe they're thinking it's popular enough in the U.S. that they'll continue it. So when I read it, I'll see whether it does come to some kind of conclusion or not. And I'm really loving DC Nation, this free promotional comic or promotional magazine for DC. Unlike some of the other promotional things, it actually is pretty meaty. It has quite a lot of interesting articles along with the hype. And I enjoy these things where they tell you about what different people do in their office and things like that. And the interviews with people, character redesign articles. It feels almost, it doesn't look like at all Foom, but it kind of reminds me of the old Foom, which was definitely there just to promote Marvel and celebrate Marvel, but it also had a little more depth than your normal promotional materials. So yeah, if you have any interest in DC and this is free, I would just pick it up. And then I pay to get Image Plus, which I also enjoy for similar reasons. But this also has a lot of samples. In fact, I should be paying more attention to Image Plus. I think it still has the continuing Witches at the back. Let's see. Yes, it does. And I've been putting off, I wanted to read a whole bunch of issues together of Witches, because it was like 4 pages an issue or something. But what I did read was pretty good. 5 pages. So there you are, caught up with Sleepy Reader at the moment. 41 and a half minutes so far, so I apologize. I never intend to do such a long video. I thought this would be about 25 minutes, which is long enough. But if you've hung on to the end, thank you, and bye-bye.